Kim had discovered her love for marine science before high school. Growing up in Mobile, Alabama, she had ample opportunity to frequent the beach and learn more about its inner workings. In her sixth grade science class, taught by her mother, Kim visited the Dauphin Island Sea Lab and was immediately taken with the marine animals she saw. Kim received her bachelor's degree in marine science from the University of Hawaii at Hilo in 2001. Kim's first job after college was working for NOAA's Coral Reef Ecosystem Division, where she was hired as a marine debris specialist. Kim learned firsthand the impact of marine debris in remote locations. A highlight was freeing a green sea turtle from marine debris in Pearl and Herms Atoll in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. While working for NOAA, Kim began pursuing a master's degree in benthic coral reef ecology and seaweed from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. After over a decade, she and her husband Mark decided to come back to Alabama. Kim had been teaching biology at a local community college when she chanced upon a Craigslist ad for a marine debris job at NOAA. And after taking a year off to raise her two daughters, Kim started her own freelance company and was contracted to create a platform to help coordinate response efforts during a disaster. This platform, the Disaster Coordination Dashboard, is now the central tool used for disaster coordination in the National Ocean Service. Awesome, Kim. Can't wait to hear from you. You can go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. One quick question. Are y'all all here local, or are you scattered around the U.S. right now?
Most of us are mobile right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Or in the area.
Good deal. Well, as Carrie mentioned, I was born and raised here in Mobile, Alabama, and my my journey in life has been quite of an adventure, and has twisted and turned and taken me to some pretty amazing places. And so I thought what I would do today is kind of talk a little bit about my about this journey, and with some kind of key little points that I wanted to bring out to all of you in hopes that it will be something that you guys can remember and take with you and can impact the direction and course of your own lives. So the first thing that I will say is that as a little girl growing up here in Mobile, here, let's see, did I go to slide 2? Yes, okay. And that's me, a little Kim right there, little Kim. So I, at a very young age, I latched on to the idea of becoming a marine biologist, and I took that on. That was my goal in life. I was going to be a marine biologist, and I pursued it with everything that I had. And it was, it took me to some pretty cool things, and took me to some pretty cool places and things. But I wanted to say that with time, though, my goals have actually shifted quite a bit, right? And I know some of you may be in a place where you know exactly what you want to do, but then when you get there, it may be different, right, than you anticipated, and your goals may shift because of that. And I will say, so the way the course of my life started out was I had this really clear goal, and I pursued it for a while. Like Carrie mentioned, my education, I've got, I went to the University of Hawaii. So I started out actually, graduate of Murphy High School. So go Murphy Panthers. And then I started out at a liberal arts college in Alabama, actually. And 2 years into that, keep in mind, I had this goal, right, of becoming a marine biologist. And I realized that I was landlocked in Birmingham, for one thing. I loved Birmingham, and I loved my friends, and I loved my school. But at the same time, I wasn't pursuing my dream. And I actually had a conversation with a friend, one of my high school buddies, who, you know, high school buddies, lifetime buddies, some of them. So she was telling me, we were talking about what we wanted to be when we grow up, so to speak. And she was like, Kim, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, well, I'm marine biology. She was like, oh, come on, give it up now already. You know, you're not going to do that. What do you really want to do? And I was like, that's what I really want to do. And it was I was really angry with her at the time because she was telling me I wasn't doing what I should be doing, but it was the kick in the pants, so to speak, that I needed in order to kind of reevaluate and assess where I was and what I was doing and whether it was going to put me in the trajectory that I wanted to be in life. And so I ended up transferring to the University of Hawaii at Hilo on the Big Island my junior year. And it took me 3 more years to graduate from undergrad because I had transferred. And, you know, you all probably know that it takes more time sometimes when you do that. But it was a life-changing decision. And it was a really positive thing for me. And I like I said, I really chased that dream of becoming a marine biologist. And after I finished my undergrad, got hired on pretty quickly with a new program that was going out to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands to remove marine debris. And the picture there is of me freeing a sea turtle. And while I was there, I also worked on my master's and finished my master's degree studying seaweeds, which was, again, you know, this is you think you want to do one thing, and then when you get into studying, you may be surprised what you really like. And that's something I'm going to bring up again as kind of a theme. But I ended up studying seaweeds and benthic coral reef ecology, so looking at corals and the seaweeds and the different interactions involved with those things. And then I really feel like I scratched that itch, so to speak. You know, I got to experience pretty fully what I, as a little girl, as this little Kim, I got to go places and see things and do things. And I spent, I was in Hawaii as an undergrad through, so 1998 to 2006. So I'm dating myself for you guys. But I spent quite a bit of time out at sea, scuba diving, in the water, really loving every minute of it. And at the end of that time, I think we always come to these cruxes in our life of what next, you know? And for me, I had a partner at the time who had pursued a PhD at the Oregon State University. He's actually my husband now. And so I had the opportunity to either stay in Hawaii or join Mark, my husband, who you guys get to hear from, I think, later in a couple weeks from now. And I chose to move to Oregon for a number of reasons, in part because my goals had shifted, you know, and we were thinking about what's next in our life. We were thinking about family. We were thinking about the affordability of life. If anybody has ever been to Hawaii, it's a very expensive place to live. And so it was a challenge to meet those expenses and to think about starting a family in a place that would be so expensive, where we were, you know, living paycheck to paycheck and very much on a, you know, shoestring budget there. And so I made the transition to Oregon. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to work doing something completely different. I mean, it was still in science and it was still out in the field. So I had a lot of the skills that it required. So a lot of the skills that, even though you are applying them in a different way, the skills that you are learning today can be applicable to different jobs in the future. And so The new job was more was oceanography, and it was very instrument heavy. So before I was studying biology, right? Pretty straight up biology and ecology. The only instrument I had was a sheet of paper and a pencil, underwater paper, an underwater pencil. But, you know, moving on to this next position, and you can see this is a picture of me. This is a CTD, which is a conductivity temperature and depth sensor. Conductivity measures the salinity of the ocean. And you've got the temperature and then the density of the ocean. And you drop this thing through the water and it gives you a profile of the ocean, of those different measurements. And I never had much involvement with instrumentation, but here I was taking on a job where I led deploying these instruments along the Oregon coast and analyzing that data and doing some pretty different things that I never thought I would end up doing. Hop again. So I don't have a picture of this in this profile here, but my career really came full circle back to marine debris. When I first moved back to Alabama, I started with NOAA's marine debris program as the regional coordinator for the marine debris program for the whole Gulf Coast. So that was a job that kind of brought me full circle, because here I was back in Alabama, you know, back doing marine debris, which was my first job out of college, and being able to work on something that was really near and dear to my heart, which was this issue of trash. And so, and then there's all these like things that shift with time, right, and experience. And then I had my first daughter, and Amelia Grace Albins was born on May 29th of 2015. She's got a birthday coming up real soon. And she was, I went back to work, you know, I did the working mom thing for a little while. And then 6 months after she was born, I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter. And just had one of those other moments where I had to take, you know, a step back and analyze what I wanted out of life. And my goals had shifted. I just really wanted time. I wanted time with my kids and with my family. And so I took a step back from my career for a bit. And now I'm back to work full time with NOAA. And now I'm working in the Office of Response and Restoration program, which is the same group that houses the marine debris program. But now I'm doing disaster preparedness, and I'm the training coordinator. And I tell you all of this because there's some themes that kind of weave through my career that I think may be valuable to all of you that are early in your career, that I want to just to talk about. And one is this idea that your goals are going to shift with time and your experience. And if you find yourself at a place where you're like, I don't know what to do next, you know, I've had so many times like that where I'm just in that place where I have no idea what I want to do next. And one of the things that I reevaluated when I with my one of those transition times where I was looking for the next thing to do, it was, you know, I had this really intense goal as a young kid to become this marine biologist, and I pursued that. But then what I realized as I got older and had more experience is that my goals were a little more broad, actually, and the things that I really valued weren't necessarily a place and a time and a title, but kind of a set of qualities that I wanted out of work. And so my new goals became these right here: the opportunity to lead, to be a part of a team. That was something that I've had throughout my career, is this team approach. And I know you guys are experiencing that right now, which is so awesome. It's so awesome to be part of a team that's a good functioning team. You learn so much, even if it's a bad team, you learn from bad team experiences too. It's such a good thing. And this was probably one of my favorite teams that I had. This was my last year in Oregon. We were off the Oregon coast here. We had just finished the season and pulled in our last mooring of the year, and it was pretty heavy duty work, you know, wearing hard hats and we had overhead gear, 500-pound anchors that we were deploying. So some pretty hardcore stuff. And I think when you're working in those situations, which I think you guys are probably doing, you really have a sense of trust and bond with those folks that you work with. And it's something that's kind of special. And that's something that I like, you know, and I want to be a part of a team. And that team is going to look a little different depending on the job that you're in, but that's something that I value. And I also value an opportunity to learn and grow. And so I think you can have a good experience in a position if there is that opportunity to learn and grow. And of course, these are going to look different for you than they do for me. But this was what it boiled down to for me at one point in terms of a transition. I wanted meaningful work, you know. I think for me, that's a big part of, you know, I don't have to be saving the environment all the time. I believe in conservation. There's values that I bring that are important to me. And if I can feel like that I'm contributing in some way to those things, it makes a job more valuable to me and more interesting. So right now, I'd say as a trainer, you know, we're teaching people how to be best prepared for oil spills and different things like that. And I think that that's really valuable. And while my role is one part of that, it's nice to know that I'm a part of something bigger. And that's something I value. And then lastly, you know, a decent income, and that's something I'll talk about in some of the other slides. But of course, you know, that is something that you also look for in the future opportunities is those things. So essentially through time, even though if I would ask myself, you know, 10, 15 years ago, where I would be today, I would never have anticipated that I'd be in the position that I'm in right now. I projected for myself a very straight path to in this certain direction, but as I walked that path, there were twists and turns, and good twists and turns. And you know, I think that that's something that has been a part of my journey, at least. The other thing I wanted to say is that what you end up loving, and it's very related to what I just said before, what you end up loving in your job might actually surprise you. You know, we're always learning who we are as individuals. And it was, so that job in Oregon, actually, I mentioned this before, so this is me holding one of those CTDs. Another part of this job was analyzing some of this oceanographic data, which required me to learn how to use code. And I had never done that before, and I was totally overwhelmed by the idea of it. And I was scared of it and didn't want to do it. I had no desire. But here I was, okay, I have to do this. It's part of my job. I need to figure this out. So I enrolled. They let me take a sit in on a class where I didn't have to get graded, thank God. So it was low pressure, but I was learning how to use this this new software, and I ended up really, really liking it. I completely surprised myself. I would end up working late and being in this MATLAB is a coding software program that oceanographers often use, where you know, write loops and all those different things in code. I'm not sure how much you guys are familiar with that stuff, but it's a computer language programming. And I would spend, you know, hours in this world and lose complete track of time. I enjoyed it. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was a complete surprise to me. And this has been a theme throughout my career, actually, that, and, you know, I tell my daughter this all the time when she says she doesn't like broccoli. I said, you don't know until you try the broccoli. So please taste it first. And it's very true in our careers, too. You really don't know. I mean, until you give something a shot. So I just want to encourage you guys, if you're intimidated by something and it's scary, and, you know, you may end up finding you really were right and you didn't like it, but you really don't know until you've tried it. So I just encourage you to pursue those things, even if they're a little bit scary, and you might surprise yourself. And I mentioned this before. So it turns out money is a factor. And this changes through time as well, right? And for me in grad school, you know, I didn't need a whole lot, right? It was me. I had a surfboard. I lived in Hawaii. Life was good. You know, I had my budget dialed in, you know. I remember going out to eat with, this is a funny story. I remember going out to eat with my advisor at the time, who made a lot more money than I did. And I did never have a credit card. And I will say that was smart on my part, even though you know, hindsight, it's a good thing I didn't, because I probably would have got myself in big trouble. But we were sitting to eat at this place, and I knew, I was like, I have $2 in my checking account right now. Like, that is it. I'm like, what can I buy on this menu for $2? Like, I'll have a nice tea. So I think, you know, what you need in terms of money is definitely a factor. And, you know, now in my life, I have a lot more responsibilities. And so that has changed through time as well. And so, of course, when I'm thinking of what I do next, that's a factor. And, you know, I definitely, if you can avoid credit card debt, it's so daunting for so many people. Some debt is good, right? Like I'm still paying off student loans, but that education was really, really important to me. And it opened so many doors for me. But it's low interest, you know. And I will also say, if any of you are pursuing master's degrees, there are ways to have those things covered, you know, and that's something, if you guys want to talk about when I'm done talking, I think there'll be plenty of time for questions. But just say, you know, money, it turns out that is a factor. At least it has been a factor in my career, which I didn't think it would be. I was a very naive adolescent, young adult, I think. But you can make a living in our field. It is doable. Okay. Another little thought that I had is to grow where you are planted, and to also remember that sometimes plants need to be transplanted to grow. I come from a botany background, so I love plants. And I will just say that that's my motto right now. Is I got into this position that I'm in, and it's, you know, I would say, if it's not somewhere where I anticipated myself going. But again, I'm learning some things that I never thought I would learn. I am experiencing things that I really enjoy, that I didn't know I would enjoy. And I'm growing, you know, I'm building a breadth of experience that I think is going to be incredibly valuable. Last week, we put on a lecture seminar series that had 300 people in it, you know, and I'm learning the technology to run those types of meetings and to facilitate that sort of thing. And I'm learning all about instructional design and how to teach adults and things that I never knew. And so, you know, I think sometimes where you end up being is a little different where you anticipated being. But I would recommend that, and, you know, encourage you all to try to grow there, you know, grow wherever you end up, pursue the opportunities that are there, because there's often skills that you learn that will be so valuable down the road that you never anticipated. So for me, you know, I moved around quite a bit. I learned so much in each of these different places, and I now, you know, was in Hawaii and Oregon, and the culture of Hawaii has just left a huge impact on me personally. And the same with Oregon, you know, and then coming back home and bringing all of those collective experiences back with me. I think I've grown a whole lot through those travels and times. So while you're young and don't have kids and other responsibilities, I recommend traveling if you can. Although right now we're kind of stuck, right? That's another story, right? Okay. So you don't know what you don't know. This is another little thing that is a theme right now. So we often know what we know. You know, we've studied, right? We've studied this or that, and through those studies, we can identify some things that we don't know. So I know all about coral reefs, for instance, but I also know that I don't know much about the intricate molecular biology of a coral polyp, for instance. That's not something I studied, but I know I don't know that, right? But we don't often know the things that we don't know. And this is actually the theme of our lecture series that I'm running right now, is you don't know what you don't know. So I can't take the credit for coming up with this idea, but it's really true in life in general. And currently, the thing that that I didn't know that I've learned recently is that I'm in a field. So I'm now a training coordinator for the Office of Response and Restoration, and training, adult education and training, is its own field. It's a huge field. There's giant meetings of thousands of people that come together to talk about how to train people. I had no idea. I did not know that, you know, and you can get a PhD in instructional design. This was a field that I was just completely unaware. And so we are all learning every single day. We're learning new things. And I think it's a good exercise for us to all have that realization that, and that humility to know that we don't know what we don't know, you know, and, you know, and come to that place where that's part of our journey, is to be open to learning those new things. Okay, I'm almost done with slides, y'all. I just put these together. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. And this is something I just recently saw on the internet, and I thought it was really relevant for today for some reason. So don't let people put you into a box and define you. We are a collection of our experiences and our beliefs, and just because you fit in doesn't mean you belong there. I thought that was really neat little picture there. And my personal experience, my example is that I am a person of faith. I'm also a scientist, which sometimes people, you know, that's a challenge for a lot of people. You know, I had to come to terms with my own faith and my own and how that fit. And it doesn't fit into a lot of people's boxes, right? Like, I don't fit into people's boxes of how they would define, you know, my dad was a pastor. He was an evangelical pastor. So I grew up very much in an evangelical home in Mobile, Alabama. You can imagine what that's like, right? It's very different, and there's very different thoughts and feelings on what is science and how to interpret science. And so it took me some time, I think, to come full circle into my own faith, but I was able to say, hey, look, I don't have to fit your peg and your model for your faith. You know, I came through my own journey to my own faith, my own experience. And so I wanted to put this in here because I know that it's a struggle sometimes. And I think you guys are all at the age where you're going through some of these experiences of who you are and defining who you are. And I just want to encourage you that you guys will each be your own, and that's okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay to not fit the model, so to speak. And then one last thing that I wanted to just, because we're in this situation that's really kind of crazy for all of us, right? We are in unprecedented times, right? And I believe, you know, this is part of my faith, that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, so to speak. But we are made for this. We are made to get stronger through struggle. That's in our DNA. And it's something that we talk about with the environment all the time too. And I'm sure you guys have heard the term resilience. And it's important to bend and not break, you know. And so, and this is kind of pulls everything together too. Your career may not take the path that you think it should or that you imagined it would, but there are so many opportunities out there to grow and become. And, you know, I'm still gonna be something when I grow up. You know, I'm in my 40s now, but I still have a trajectory, and I don't know what that trajectory is. And sometimes that not knowing is scary, but I will say that it's also kind of exciting, right? There's fear, but it's exciting too, to have unknown opportunities ahead. So that's all I have to say. If there's anything you guys wanted to talk about, or I am open for any kind of discussion or questions or whatever. I'm gonna end this so I can see y'all better. How do I stop sharing, Carrie?
Here, I'll take it over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, we've got a couple of good questions in the chat box. I guess to start things off, Amber has more than one good question. One's a short, easy one, and then one's a little bit deeper of a question. So, Amber, why don't you ask both of your questions?
The easy one, we'll start with that one first, is what's your favorite biology book?
My favorite biology book. Well, the first one that came to mind is I said I was into seaweeds, so I have some really good identification guides books, you know, for identifying the different seaweeds and the different fish, and so I have some like pretty worn out copies of there's the Littlers, Littler. They were really great phycologists, so that's the word for seaweed biologist, that went through the Pacific Ocean and collected, and the Caribbean, actually. They have a book on the Caribbean. I was in the Pacific, so I don't have the Caribbean book, but photo documented all of these amazing organisms. So I think that's the first one that comes to mind.
Thank you. That's something that a few of us, we like knowing like the different books that you guys suggest. So the other question was basically like, before you had like responsibilities that tied you down to a more stable location, would you have chosen a position that offered experience over one that offered better pay?
Definitely. That's who I was. I was definitely, I didn't care about money at the time. When I was probably in your guys' time, that was secondary for me, and getting the experience was, I needed to live. I did not have a blank check anyway. I had to support myself. So that was important for sure. I couldn't, I was not volunteering. I was not able to volunteer. I was not in a position to do that. So, so to some extent, right, as long as I could support myself, I would take positions. But I shared houses with people, and you figure out ways to live, eat the ramen noodles and drink the cheap beer.
Austin, I think, has a pretty good question about challenges. So you want to ask your question, Austin?
Sure thing. Were there ever any times that you committed to a job or project that you ended up not liking, and how did you make things work out in the end?
Well, I'm trying to think of, so I spent a lot of time out at sea. So I'll tell you the story. I spent a lot of time out at sea, and we like to call time at sea, or I came up with the idea that it's kind of a pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker for relationships. You're either going to come out of that situation really good friends with people or not. Because you spend every day with them, and you're in a very intense situation a lot. And I think there was one situation where we had some sexual harassment and some it was just some bad stuff going on. And I think I was literally stuck on the boat, so we weren't going anywhere. But I will say that through that experience, I learned a lot about who I was and how to address conflict, and how to come through that on the other end. So I think those opportunities in those times, even though they're really hard, in the end, those are huge personal growth times too, looking back. And I don't think I've ever been in a position where I felt like I needed to, well, actually I did quit a job one time in Mobile. Actually, I was, they had that call center in Mobile for Sears, and I was doing that job. I was a call center at Sears, and I went through the training. I loved the training. I thought it was so fun. And then I started working, and it was the most tedious job I'd ever done. And I didn't interact with any people. I just sat on the phone, and I got in trouble because I had a conversation with this sweet lady from Virginia, and they were like, "You don't need to have conversations with people. You need to sell, sell, sell." And I quit. I just cut my losses on that one. So, yeah, I guess there has been times where I just, you cut your losses, but that was, I also, at the time was living with my mom and dad, and that was an option for me. I could quit. I had a place to live and food to eat. So.
Cool. I think Ashley has an interesting question just about experiences, kind of taking things in a different direction, a fun question.
Yeah, give me just a second. I'm trying to scroll up and find my question again. I saw your picture earlier where you went diving. I was wondering, do you have a favorite diving story, or just something interesting you found that you'll never forget?
I was so lucky, y'all, to go and dive in some amazing, amazing places. So I have loads of stories. So I didn't go through all my history, but one of my jobs with NOAA, it shifted. So I was doing marine debris work, and then I started my master's work, and I became a more of a benthic ecologist, and we would go and do these coral reef monitoring cruises throughout the Pacific. So I went to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands and studied the seaweeds there and the different corals there. And then we went to the equatorial islands, and this was amazing. Okay. And I wish I had pictures I could show you guys that I could just bring up. So the Line and Phoenix Islands, Kingman Atoll is probably one of my favorite places in the whole world. It looks like a triangle from above. So it's an equatorial islands that is actually, they're U.S. Pacific Island territories. Yeah, so I spent, I think something like 500 days at sea in the end, and many hours underwater, and like studying these animals and seaweeds and documenting. So we would go to these places to collect data to monitor for change. So we're just, you know, they are in our jurisdiction as the US. So it was important for us to know if there was any impacts going on with climate change or anything like that. So giant clams were so cool, manta rays, sharks, all sorts of really, really amazing diving experiences that I have over 500 dives or something like that, all over the Pacific. Pretty cool stuff.
That's how
Cool.
Just show some other day if y'all want me to.
Only because that's a really good segue into Carrie's question. Carrie, you can ask your question.
Oh, I think you didn't mention this specifically, but we had another speaker. His name was John. Its last name starts with a K, but he used to manage the Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge.
No way.
And so, well, we've seen your reaction. I assume you've been there, but yeah, he gave us a whole thing. There's a video on our Gulf Corps YouTube that I can share with you. I wonder, you probably met him. I'd have to look it up. It was like Cree letter or something. It was kind of hard to
I know the
pronounce.
current manager out there right now. Actually, he went to grad school with me. But yeah, I spent a lot of time at Midway in place. So that's cool that you guys got to see a picture of that. So my master's work was at Pearl and Hermes Atoll, which is an island over from Midway. So we spent a lot of time there for the marine debris work because it was just a highly concentrated area of these giant nets that would wash up. So they're giant fishing nets that would wash up on these reefs out in the Pacific. And so we anchored our boat off of Pearl and Hermes. We were there for 3 months one time, anchored on a boat. Pressure cookers, telling you. Amazing opportunity, definitely. And getting to really kind of, I think you become friends almost with the organisms, you know, like, oh, look, here's that pod of dolphins that greets us every morning as we go, because nobody else is there, right? So when they see you, they're like, what is this thing called a human, you know? It's pretty neat. And Midway was like civilized for us. So we got to go to Midway a couple times, and they had like, you know, depending, it changed a lot through time. At one point, they were having tourists come to Midway, and so they had a restaurant, and they had a bowling alley, and a bar, and CNN. You know, it was like we've made it to civilization. But yeah, that's cool. I'll have to share that with me, Carrie. I'd like to know who that was, especially if they live here in Mobile.
No, he's up in DC
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
He was, yeah, Brittany put it in here. It was John Claveter. I was close. But I'll send you an email with the link to his video. But yeah, he had a pretty interesting story, and he was telling us about how he got to go scuba diving with Obama there at Midway. So you guys are competing against each other for who is better with the dives. But that's awesome.
Yeah, no, so he was after me. I beat him out there, but yeah, because Obama wasn't president until I lived in Oregon.
Eric, I think, had a really good deep question. So Eric, if you want to ask your question.
Sure. Gotcha. Gotta scroll up. It's a lot of questions. Where is it?
Was that 119?
All right. You said 15 years ago that you never thought you'd be in a position that you're in now. What would be your advice or quote that you would leave a person with to help them motivate them achieve their goals?
That's a great question. Let's see. I think there, that was kind of a few things that I think. One is, if you know your goal, pursue it. Pursue that goal through education if you can. I think that is always a way to pursue something, is through learning. I'm a certified dork right here, nerd right here. I love to learn and I love to be in school. So I mean that's how we grow, right? Through learning. And so that's one thing. The other thing is if you're not in a place where you know exactly where you want to be in 15 years, that's okay too, right? That's okay too. And to grow where you're planted, like I said before, and to not be afraid to try something that is outside of your comfort zone, because it may turn out that is what you want to end up doing. That is the thing that you really, really love. So I think for me, I feel like my career, there's been some common themes, right, through my career. I'm still working in marine science to some degree, but the skills that I've learned throughout my career have really are really diverse, and I've learned some new things, and I haven't pigeonholed myself into one place. I've built up a set of skills that are applicable for so many different things. So I also encourage that as well, to look for those ways that you can learn not just to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you. So if you've got an opportunity to learn about oil spill science, for instance, because that's what I came to mind. Learn. You never know. You never know what that door will open for you down the road.
Cool. So Cody has a question that's specifically about code. Just a backstory there. You kind of opened a can of worms with that, because we did a coding activity a couple weeks ago and it was very controversial. Some people really liked it, and a lot of people really struggled with it and hated it. So that's just the backstory. But Cody has a question that's specifically about coding, so I'll let him ask.
How important is learning how to code in conservation? I struggle with learning how to code a lot. I haven't found a lot of programs that really go into depth about why to do certain things, which is probably why I have an issue with coding. Do you have any tips for that as well?
So it kind of depends. There's a lot of it depends on answers, right? Sorry. Depends on what you end up pursuing. Like, I am not using any coding in my career right now at all, and I'm fine. The knowledge that I have that you can do things with code is very beneficial for me, though, I will say, because I've been saying, I can tell somebody, I don't know how to do that, but I know it's doable. So let's find the right expertise to do that. And so with project management, so I do a lot of project management as well now. And so it's helpful to know the power of it. It is really powerful to know that you're not confined. So you're not confined to processes that are written and created by somebody else. A lot of what we do in science you know, the application is really novel. And because it's novel, nobody's spent the time to create, you know, an easy to use application to do what we need to do. And so that's oftentimes the why, right? Like and the other thing is often it's not a marketable thing, right? Like analyzing scientific data, there's not that many people that are going to make money doing that. So they're not going to spend the time and money to create that application because it's not very cost beneficial for them. So it is a skill that is useful in the sciences because of that, because there's not a lot of off-the-shelf things that can do what we need to do. Do you have to have it? No. Is it good to know it exists? Yes. Is it good to try? Yes. And I will say too, Cody, that I was reading a lot of code. So it's like learning a language, right? And I think there's some different levels in learning a language. And the first level for me was reading, right? Like I could read it. I couldn't write it. It took me a long time to be able to write code. I'm still not very good at it, but and I don't use it anymore, so I've lost it. That's the other thing with languages, right? Like if you don't practice your Spanish, you're not going to remember how to do it. So that's where I am right now. I probably can hardly even read it anymore. But that's the my husband is actually, and he's gonna, Mark Albins will be presenting for you guys. I forget the date, but he's a expert in R code. So he does a lot of R coding, and so you could ask him about that stuff too, because he knows a lot about it. And the cool thing about R, unlike MATLAB, is it's free. Anybody can access it. It's totally freeware. And MATLAB, to have a site license for that, is super expensive. So it's super powerful, you know, and it makes, if you know how to do it and do it well, you can do, it makes other things a lot easier. But there's a steep learning curve. There is no doubt about that.
Thank you for answering my question.
Awesome. Well, from what I can see, I think we pretty much answered all of the questions. There are a few more questions, but I think you've more or less already answered them in your other answers. If anybody has any more questions that they want to speak up and ask, you're certainly welcome to.
I have a question for all of you. So I know you're working for Student Conservation Association right now, and you're doing this pretty intensive work through these teams that you're in. Do you want, is that your goal? Is that your career goal, to stay in conservation, or are there different career goals? Or are you just kind of like?
Is Braylon on
sure.
here? Braylon's not on today? I can just, well, I'll let them speak for themselves, but we did like a career day.
There he is.
Oh, there's Bray. I was going to say, we did a career day back in February, and everybody was like kind of conservation related, but Braylon wants to do film. So Bray, if you want to tell Kim about your goals, calling you out.
Yeah, so I do like conservation work. However, at the end of the day, I do want to own an animation studio, and I do want to get into film and animation directing.
Oh, neat. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna be living in debt for the rest of my life. It'll be worth it.
Well, you know, and I will say, even the experiences that you have now, who knows, maybe you'll be using that as material and content someday, you know, the relationships that you build and the characters that you know, like I really believe that we paint a landscape with our careers and our lives, right? And you never know what will be useful. I have a good friend that was diving with me in Midway and diving with me in the Pacific, and she's a film. She does underwater film, so it's not quite the biggest leap, but she's really, I mean, it was a huge shift in her career from biologist to the term is film person. You know, she like creates films and has won awards and all sorts of things. So it's pretty neat.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I could see if she could speak with you guys. That would be kind of fun.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I know for me personally, and I think for a lot of us are in the same boat. We want to stay in conservation. We're just not sure exactly which direction we want to go in conservation, whether that be like wildlife biology management stuff or like nature education stuff or like what we're doing now, like the grunt work type, you know, forestry, chainsaw type stuff, or law enforcement stuff. There's just so many different directions and we're not really sure which way to go, but we definitely want to, you know, play a role in conservation. I think that's where I'd venture to say most of us are at. Some of us have specific goals. In fact, one of us had a specific goal left last week to pursue that goal because she got an internship. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, I will say, you know, I definitely did my share of grunt work, and I had, you know, moving heavy. I was a forklift driver and all sorts of stuff like that. And I think, you know, if you're frustrated by that, or if you know, I personally, I love the field work, and I kind of was like, I need to have babies and I can't do this field work anymore. So that was part of my instigation for stepping away from the more grunt work type thing, is because of my other goals in life. But I do think that some of the things that you learn, regardless of where you are and what you're doing, like teamwork, you know, learning how to work in that team and learning how to be you know, organized and inventories and, you know, the things that you guys, I'm sure, are doing are really useful skills. They're useful skills for so many different things. And I think even for Bray, like I said, the characters that you meet during this time will probably inform some of the characters you create in the future, you know, because it's part of what's cool about life is, you know, my life has come full circle a couple times, you know, where here I am back in Mobile. I literally live 5 miles away from the house I grew up in. You know, I was gone away from Mobile for 15 years. I had no intention of ever moving back. And yet here I am. So, and I'm happily here too. It's great to be back here. I love it. So.
And as far as like your grunt work goes, like you were talking about, like when I saw that picture of you with the CTD cast, all I could like think about was like during one of my marine ecology class, we had to do that. And like the guys are just picking them up and just throwing them overboard. And I'm like, that's easy. That looks good. I can do that. And I go to pick one up and I'm like, they're so heavy.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, is like figuring out how to use your, I mean, I worked my tail off, carried heavy things. I'm pulling up nets, you know, physical hard work I've done throughout my career. And I miss it, honestly. I miss that. I've been like, I sit behind a desk way too much now, but there is, you know, it is part of it. And I think that's one of the things I would, if you guys like what you're doing, you know, learn those skills, get your scuba diving certification, you know, pursue, stay in shape, you know, do those things, because it does help, you know, open up opportunities and doors down the road for sure. Especially if that's something you like and you enjoy.
How do you go about getting like this scuba diver certification, and how expensive is it?
You know, the expense is something I'm not super in touch with that right now. but there's a few different agencies here locally, and this was when I was 15 years ago, or 15 years old, which was 30 years ago now almost. But this dive shop is still in existence. Gulf Coast Divers here in Mobile. I got certified with those guys again years ago, but they were really a great group back then. I'm not sure how great they are anymore. But there's
Our team leader Brittany just got certified with him, right?
okay.
I think she just logged back in too, because this is definitely her question.
Yeah, so that so Gulf Coast Divers, they were great back then, and they're a local dive shop here in Mobile that's been around for a while. And then I know that there's a guy over in Daphne too that has a dive shop. But then there's often, and usually a little cheaper, like the YMCA will do PADI open water certification. So an open water certification is what you start with, and then you can pursue through that, like your advanced and your I'm a PADI dive master, but then when I was working for NOAA, they have their own certifications. So you know, it just really kind of depends on what direction. But I was a NOAA working diver and a NOAA scientific diver, which then I was a NOAA working diver. So in order for me to use tools underwater, like knives and things, I had to get certified as a working diver, which was a lot more stringent. And we had to do a lot of safety stuff. And one of the hardest things that you were talking about, lifting a heavy CTD, some of the guys that I worked with were twice my size. There was a guy who was probably 6'5" and weighed, 250 pounds, and I had to pull him into a boat. I had to figure out how to get this huge man into a boat. And, it wasn't pretty, but it happened. So I think, you got to give yourself a little credit for your abilities too. I think we if you want something, I think we humans in general and all of you have the potential to pursue that. Just got to keep working, keep trying.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kim. I see that it's a little past 2, so we won't keep you if you have something else to go on to. But if anybody else has like a burning question, feel free to ask it. If not, we'll say our goodbyes to Kim and thank you. And excited for Mark to join us. He's going to be, Kim's husband is going to be talking about lionfish, correct? I think that's right. So
yes, he's he did his PhD on lionfish. So, and he's got a lot more dive, numbers of dives and time underwater, just a little bit different experience. He did a lot of his work out in the Caribbean, studying those lionfish. So I think y'all will enjoy hearing from him in a couple of weeks, I think.
Awesome.
Austin has his hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Austin.
I was going to ask you, I already have a love-hate relationship with R, but that's definitely worth working on it more for conservation, isn't it?
Yes, I would say yes. It is definitely, I think, the direction that a lot of people are going in because it's free, and ecologists and conservationists are generally not super well funded. So having access to free code. And so I will also say, so Mark's teaching a stats class right now, and he's teaching the whole thing in R. So, you got this budding set of biologists coming out of their graduate careers knowing how to use R. So I do think that's a good one to know how to use. Learn to love it there, Austin.
You're going to have to prep him and let him know we're going to have a bunch of coding questions for him.
I will let him know. I think he'll be happy about that. He does a lot more of that right now than he does lionfish. So he knows a lot about that stuff.
Awesome.
Way over my head.
Well,
all right.
Thanks again, Kim.
Yeah,
hope
thank
you
you
have
very
a great
much.
week.
Yeah.